Hello. I'm gonna warn listeners right off the bat. I am legally half dead at the moment from just the worst seasonal allergies I've ever experienced. So I'm operating at diminished capacity and probably sound like a creaky door in a haunted attic. So I've been better, but that's not because I'm not happy to be here.
Well, we are very, very grateful to have you here despite the man versus nature
Oh,
struggle that I know you're
oh,
engaged
the
in.
struggle's over. I lost. I concede. You will probably hear a lot of throat clearing and coughing that I'm going to try and do off mic. But
Yes.
you've also noticed when I lose my voice, which was totally gone like 3 days ago, I drop like an octave and a half. So enjoy that much at least. It's very rich and resonant.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm kind of catching you at like a just before moment. It's April 19th today, and so we're just a couple weeks out from your new book, I Know a Place, which will be out on May 5th
Yeah.
everywhere books are sold. But the early praise is already rolling in, including from me, and also from a little known horror writer from Maine, Mr. Stephen King. Uh, so, what does this moment feel like for you, other than dying by pollen? How would you describe your new book?
I'm super excited. I can't wait for people to read it. It's always a weird thing because especially I'm used to being traditionally published with Torn Nightfire, and in that case, like you turn your book in, and it's usually like a year later that it comes out, and so it's this long, protracted sort of run up to it actually being in people's hands, and you start to feel a little bit like, oh, I remember that book vaguely. Like I already had my emotional moments with it, and I'm just waiting for it to come out. But this, on the flip side, is like we just like we locked everything down in January, I think,
Yes.
was when I like finished the last story for this collection, because this is being published through Shortwave, which is an indie publishing house, and so it moves so much faster, and we're like so much nimbler and stuff like that. So it is weirdly like a similar feeling in that I'm like, oh man, I can't believe we're talking about this book, but it's kind of the inverse because now it's like, wait, I thought this book's not coming out for like another year, but nope, it's around the corner. So I'm super excited and a little baffled that it's coming so quickly. But it's been incredibly gratifying to see what people have been saying so far, and yeah, I'm really proud of this collection. I think I love short story collections, kind of in general. They're just like one of my favorite ways uh, to experience horror. Like the short story and like novella length are just so perfect for horror. And it's so I've been wanting to put together a collection for a long time, and the stars kind of aligned that this wound up being a perfect time for it. And then we got that just kind of mind blowing introduction from Stephen King, the aforementioned young writer from Maine. And yeah, like getting a Stephen King introduction is not only like a dream come true for me, to put it mildly, but I really wanted to organize this collection to be kind of evocative of his collections, which were so formative for me. So it is a very eclectic collection. It experiments with kind of form and style, and you know, much like, say, Skeleton Crew, his second collection, which begins with The Mist, a novella, and then kind of goes all over the place. This begins with Rest Stop, which was a novella of mine that was published 2 years ago through Shortwave, and then it proceeds to go from like short, disturbing vignettes to novelettes to kind of proper short stories. There's a sort of, I like to think of as like a heartbreaking little poem that's also a ghost story. That's actually like a monologue with music that I usually do live, which is recreated in the audiobook for people who would like to hear that version of it. There's an experimental theater piece. There's a story that's told entirely through emails. There's like EC comic style shockers and gross outs. There's more psychological sort of suspense stories. I mean, there's a high body count in the whole collection.
There really is.
Yeah, but they meet their ends in very different ways. So yeah, I it's always hard to objectively say this, but I feel like as close to objectively I can say that there is a story in here for everyone if you're a horror fan. Hopefully there's 13 stories for everyone. And I think most people are going to love them all. But even if only like one or two hit, they're gonna hit hard. That's my hard sell.
They're very different from one another, but they do all hang together really beautifully. And we're going to get into a few of them. We won't be able to talk about all of them, but I will say I had a very difficult time teasing out, okay, where am I going to take the conversation and what am I going to focus on? Because inevitably something will be left out. And it was difficult to think about that with this collection because they all are these little gems, you know?
Yay, that's so good to hear.
And I have a lot of questions I've prepared for our conversation, but I think the one on everyone's mind will be that introduction. So, can you tell us how that came about? And was that something that you were involved in, that Stephen King proposed, that your publisher arranged? Like, how did that come to be?
Well, the simple kind of unexciting answer is I just asked. The slightly more complicated answer, or more involved answer, not necessarily more complicated, is, I mean, for starters, I've been sending him material since I was 13 years old. Since the early 90s, I have been sending Stephen King stories and fragments and you know, very precocious demands for attention. I sent him the first version of Mary when I wrote that when I was a preteen. I mean, they all got sent back, as they should have been, because you can't send authors unsolicited material. But I didn't know that at the time. So this was a long time coming. But again, the timing just kind of worked out beautifully in that he had read When the Wolf Comes Home and very graciously said some really lovely things about that. So we were able to use blurbs from him for When the Wolf Comes Home. And I had written a short story in the Stand anthology that had come out in August of last year. And he said some really, really nice things about my story in particular. And so he had those fresh on his mind. And I was just kind of like sitting down to start thinking of this collection towards the end of last year. Because again, indie publishing moves so much faster. And I knew that, you know, the sort of long story, slightly less long of the collection is that Shortwave is a very small press. Like, it is run by one dude, basically, Alan Lestufka, who's brilliant. And when we did Rest Stop, it was their highest seller. But it was still just like, you know, a guy in his garage. And then they got this amazing distribution deal from Simon & Schuster at some point last year. And so Alan was like, well, we want to re-release Rest Stop with this distribution deal because that'll get Rest Stop into so many bookstores. But we don't want to just like beg people to buy it again. We got to figure out a way to like make people want to buy a new copy of it. And so we were like, well, let's collect some short stories along with it. And I'd done like 4 chapbooks with Shortwave at that point. So we had 4 short stories there and had a couple other short stories that had been previously published in anthologies. And then I knew I had like 5 or 6 more stories that I wanted to include that all kind of fit the sort of thematic vibe that I was thinking of going for. As you so graciously said, like these stories are not just kind of randomly thrown together. There's kind of a connection or a series of connections necessitating each of them to be in this collection. And so I was like, okay, I'll write some brand new ones for the collection too. And then by that point, you know, it's September of last year or something like that. And as part of my inspiration, I was pulling off some of my favorite short story collections from the shelf, many of which are Stephen King collections. And I pulled off one of my many copies of Night Shift, which was his very first short story collection, which was kind of a cobbling together of extant stories of his while his publishers were waiting for him to finish The Stand, which was a rather large book at the time. And I've read that collection hundreds of times, backwards and forwards, but I had kind of forgotten that there is an introduction to Night Shift written by one of his favorite authors, John D. MacDonald, who's a great pulp mystery writer. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like I can only imagine what that must have been like for him. Early career. I mean, he was, pretty successful right off the bat in his career, but it was like that must have still been like so validating for him to have like this pulp paperback genius write this introduction for his first short story collection. And I was just in a particularly ambitious and precocious mood, so I was like, well, you know what, fuck it. So I wrote to his assistant, who I've communicated with in the past, and I was like, I literally opened it with, this is the dumbest email you're gonna get today. But I was looking at Night Shift and I saw the John D. MacDonald intro and I was like, you know what, why not? I'm sure he's going to say no, but would he have any interest, since he said these nice things about other stuff, would he have any interest in writing an intro? Like, it could be a paragraph if he wants. It doesn't have to be anything major. And I didn't hear anything for like a week or two. And I was like, all right, well, I tried. Moving on. And then he wrote me back directly with an incredibly gracious and lovely email that essentially said, this is a direct quote, I do not have time to do this, but I will make time to do this. And so it was, even that alone, I was like, oh my God, that is mind-blowing. And then I remembered, I have 5 short stories I still need to finish. And if he's going to have time to read and then write an introduction, and we have, to make sure we have time to like go to the printer and have copies made of the book, I have like a month to finish everything. And these were not short stories. Like, these include Run for Your Life, which is one of the longest pieces in that. That was the last story I finished before we sent him the book. And then there were a couple other kind of lengthy stories where it was like, oh God, I have to now not only write these for an imminent deadline, but an imminent deadline where I know my biggest hero of all time is going to then be reading them. And it was just yet another moment in my life where he proved to be an amazing inspiration, because we got it done and we sent it to him. And, we made up like a very special physical arc with some, temporary, but still the same cover art, but it was just kind of bespoke for him. And he read it, and he said some very nice things in an email, and then he sent the introduction, which is 6 pages long, and is just kind of like the most amazing introduction I could have ever asked for. It's very Stephen King. It's very in his voice and funny and wise. And I was able to compartmentalize it for a long time before he turned the intro in, because I was still able to be like, maybe it'll be a page, maybe it'll be like lukewarm, maybe it'll be kind of generic. And then since he turned it in, it has now been my challenge to just kind of acknowledge that this actually happened, because it's very surreal. And I'm just incredibly grateful for the opportunity and for him to have done this in the first place.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was going to ask about that because you and I spoke for the first time in, I think, late November, December. And you mentioned that you were putting the final touches on it. And I think that day you had sent that last story. And I wanted to know which one, now that I've read the collection.
Yeah.
And I fully believe you pulled it off because you're so insanely talented, Nat. But
oh, shucks.
The story that you mentioned is one of the most complicated, complex pieces in the entire book, and my jaw is just kind of on the floor that you oh my gosh, and yet you were so cool as a cucumber talking to me about whatever we talked about, Shakespeare, something totally random and not timely.
We did talk a lot about Shakespeare. Yeah. No, I was so stupid because I saved that story. And I don't know if this is one of the stories you want to get into, but I can go into further detail if you'd like. But I saved that story for last because I was like, that'll be the easiest one to write. It is all about the Beatles, which is a subject right up there with Stephen King and Shakespeare for me. I can just talk about the Beatles ad nauseum for any length you want. And I was like, okay, well, that one I'll be able to just kind of like fire off at the very end. So we'll save that for last, and that'll just kind of be like the coast to the finish line. And as you said, like, it is such a complicated story, and I kind of wrote it twice because the first time I wrote it, it wasn't quite working, and I even I changed the ending after we sent him the book too, so he read a slightly different version of it. Yeah, the ending that the actual version has now, the final version has, is a lot more fucked up and violent and gross. So he got like a slightly more restrained ending. And then I was like, "Do you want to read the new ending?" And he was like, "No, that's fine. I got enough." Which totally understand. But yeah, so it wound up being like one of the hardest stories to write.
Yes.
Oh boy.
Well, it was one of my favorites in the collection, and I won't spoil anything about it because I want people to experience it for themselves. But just to kind of give a little bit of color before we get into my questions about it so people have context. It's essentially the story of a cover musician who's obsessed with the Beatles. He's kind of a frustrated creative, and he has this series of weird events that he experiences that give him the ability to alter history and use his knowledge of their catalog to replace them. And he's such a little shit. It's so great. He's such a devious little creature. I just love that character, even though what he does is so monstrous. And I would love to hear more about the origin of that story. And also, it got me thinking that if you were in a position to do so, and if you were evil, you could probably do the same thing to Stephen King, because out of everyone on earth, you do know his catalog backwards and forwards. And so I wondered, you're just about the only person who might be able to pull off something like that. And I wondered if that thought occurred to you and what you find horrifying about the prospect.
I could, even if I had the means by which to do it, I could never keep up with that pace. Like, dude wrote too fast for me to ever be able to compete. So he's safe. But no, like, honestly, as I was working on that story, one of the things that slowed me down a little bit on it, you know, again, I had been so sure it would be like an easy kind of like fun little riff on Poe to just kind of, you know, finish the process of writing stuff for this collection. But as I was writing that story and like the implications started getting clearer and clearer, the more I there was a big part of me that was actually conscious of like, oh God, is this a weird story to be sending to him, to Stephen King? Because like, it is a story about toxic fandom and assumption and the sort of feeling of, you know, that parasocial sort of feeling of like, well, I know your work so well, I could do this. Like, I deserve the fame and credit. You're not so great. You know, that sort of really possessive feeling of toxic fandom. And I was like, here I am, like, hey, now write an introduction for me, Stephen King. Come on. And you know, like it was also not out of my awareness that like the Beatles story in particular contains, you know, like one of the most quintessential moments of fan conducted violence. You know, John Lennon was murdered by a man who like would sign his name John Lennon occasionally, and like the last thing he did before murdering the guy was getting his autograph. Like, there is a really disturbing element to that in the Beatles story, and I think all celebrities of that generation of Kings and the Beatles, you know, all the kind of prime baby boomer celebrities were deeply affected by the assassination of John Lennon, not just because of, you know, losing an icon in their generation, but because of the fact that like a fan killed him, and this feeling of like, fuck, like, gotta watch out for fans. I mean, this is the guy that wrote Misery after all. So like it was not out of my head as I was writing the story. And it had originally come from you know, I mentioned this in the story notes of the collection, because I love story notes. So there's lengthy story notes. But I had this idea for a long time before the movie Yesterday, And I just kind of had this idea kicking around in my head of like, what if a shitty person could do this? How would that work out? And so I started, when the movie Yesterday came out, then I was like, I still got to write this story because it is totally different from the movie Yesterday. For those that don't know, the movie Yesterday is about a guy who wakes up in current day and nobody remembers the Beatles for some reason, for some magical reason. And so he has access to all these songs and suddenly he becomes famous. And it's a very imperfect movie that annoys the hell out of me because it doesn't like tease out any of the implications. Like I think there's like a Coldplay joke at one point. And it's like Coldplay doesn't exist without the Beatles. Like none of the ramifications of the Beatles not existing is examined in that movie. And it's just kind of this like whimsical little like, oh, I wrote the song Yesterday. Look how fancy I am. No, I wanted to like explore the ramifications of like if the Beatles didn't exist, how different would the landscape be? And so there's weird mystical time travel shit and occult shit happening, and I even then though I still started thinking of this story as Evil Yesterday because it was just like an easy little way to think of it. But not to repeat myself too much, as I started writing it, then I realized it was so much more than just like a simple Evil Yesterday sort of story. It really was about just like the worst kind of person being given validation. And so that was really fun to then explore. You know, I've already referenced Poe because Poe was a kind of a touchstone for this sort of story of just like a mind cracking under the weight of a sort of dream come true moment, but also that assumption that he was worthy of it without like having to work for it. Like there are very clear allegories to like AI in this story as well.
Yes.
And that feeling of like, well, I did this. Why aren't I, why don't I get all the flowers? Like I worked just as hard on this thing that is completely artificial. So that was a lot of fun. It was definitely a lot of fun to like tease out the sort of sociological and musicological ramifications of the Beatles not existing, but also then the Beatles being one person instead of four people. Yeah. And then at the end of all that, because it is a twisted story, and like the actual Beatles kind of get involved and in various hopefully satisfying ways. As they start to realize like this song, like this is a song I wrote when I was a kid, or like this song references my mother in a really weird way. Like they start taking on attributes of toxic fans themselves, but we know as the audience that like they actually have kind of a reason to feel that way. But towards the end, it wound up also being able to be a love letter in a very indirect way for the magic of the Beatles. It several times in the story references that the Beatles are like the greatest story ever told in the at least in the 20th century. And I stand by that. Like I think the story of the Beatles is a really beautiful story about four people who are damaged in their own ways, and they come together as, basically kids, and they change the world, and then they have to figure out how to live after they did all this stuff, and they still managed to leave behind this body of work that, for all its little idiosyncrasies, is fully focused on the idea of love and peace and sort of a cosmic energy and a unification and all of the like sort of eclectic albums of the latter half of their career, as the Beatles like highlight their individual quirks while also kind of contributing to this larger than the sum of its parts sort of identity. It's just like this beautiful amalgamation of so many things, and how this guy, the story is basically about how this one selfish asshole betrays all of that, and so he gets what he wants, but all of it turns to ashes in his mouth, and that's just like such a satisfying story to tell. It's also been really interesting watching early readers' responses, because it's like, I'm in my mid 40s. I missed the Beatles too, but I was raised by like a quintessential music obsessed baby boomer. So like the music of the 60s is like some of the most important things to me artistically. I grew up in a time where the sort of love affair with the 60s was still like very, very real. And it was just kind of looked back, they were obviously the greatest band of all time, the Beatles. Like, it was just like, that was shorthand. There was no questioning that. And so to read responses from people who are like now 2 generations removed from me, and are like, I don't even know who the Beatles are. Like, it's just like so interesting because culture has moved on in so many ways so quickly. And like, there's no zeitgeist anymore. And like, people don't have certain things shoved in their face the way we had the Beatles shoved in our face, whether we wanted them or not. Like, you just kind of knew who the Beatles were. And now it's not even like antipathy towards them of like, oh, I hate this music. It's like legitimately like, I don't know anything about them. Like, they were a big band from the 20th century, you say, the 1900s. So that's also been like good to see that the story still works for people who don't know the Beatles. But then there are people who are just like, I couldn't care less. Like, I just don't know who these people are.
That's mind-blowing. That actually is a little bit, I'm a little upset hearing that, because there are so many little moments throughout the collection where you do slip in these comments or these thoughts on events that are either unfolding right now in this moment or that did very recently. And I had the strangest feeling of feeling like in 20 years someone's going to be reading this and they're a college student or someone in their early 20s, and they're going to have, whatever horrible AI search engine we're going to all be and then
in their brain,
explaining to them the references. And for me, it just felt so special to be in the know and to feel like, usually when I'm reading, it's something like a Stephen King, where then I have to go look up the reference. And
yeah.
it was just a very cool and surreal moment to be feeling like, oh no, this is written for right now, and I'm right now getting to experience it. So,
oh, I love
yeah.
that. That's always such a fascinating thing with art, because like you don't want it to ever feel dated, but you want it to still like speak to contemporary things. And every now and then there are references where you're like, I wonder how that'll care. Like, there are famous examples in Shakespeare where there are references that the characters make, and scholars, even experts, just have no idea. They have no idea what they're like. There's a line in Macbeth, I think it's Macbeth. It's been a little while, where I think it's Lady Macbeth responds to something, and it's like, you're acting like the cat in the adage, and people are like, we have no idea what adage he's referring to at all. Like, there must have been an adage about a cat at some point, and like, we don't know. We just don't know. We can contextualize what that adage might have been about, but we just don't know. And yeah, just culture moves on, and it's so that's one of the fun things about literature, is that it can like solidify moments. It's like you just said, like, I always love that about reading stuff from earlier generations like Stephen King, and being like, oh, that's so that brings it to life in such an interesting way, and yet is also like so specific that I know it is not like this current moment. Like, The Dead Zone is a great example of a very timeless story that is still just like full of political details from the late 70s, where it's like, like, politics is so different now than it was then, and like the people that are being referenced are dust in literal graves, let alone cultural graves. But yeah. I hope so. I hope this is still being read in 20 years from your lips to God's ears.
I predict yes. I'll stand by that. And I was going to make kind of a dated reference. What I realize now is I'm in my mid-30s, and I was going to say this really felt like listening to like a mixtape or a mix CD.
Yeah.
Because I mean, gosh, I used to spend hours as a teenager picking out my favorite songs and making sure they flowed into one another, even though they're all being plucked from different albums. And I realized as I was writing my notes that there is going to be a whole population that is not going to understand what I mean by that, which is very bizarre and surreal. But was that something kind of on your mind too?
Absolutely, 100%. Like, and down to the metaphor. In fact, several of these stories were originally short plays, and they were short plays for theater productions of mine that I wrote and directed. and would perform in called theatrical mixtapes. They were literally short plays with original music, and they were all like, you know, about a certain theme, and the short plays would usually be like twisted little vignettes, and then I would play like an original song that sort of spoke to that and stuff like that. And they were all very much arranged with the same sort of mentality with which I would arrange my mixtapes, because I also was a huge mixtape person, and it was a science, and you would figure out which one flowed best, and you know, like this song has like a lyric that is like referenced in the next song, and this song like ends on a sustain and then a fade out, and then this song kind of begins with a fade in with like in the same key, and oh, it just works so well. I once found a segue between a Rancid song and a Ben Folds 5 song that was just like, oh, so unexpected and so perfect. Maybe the height of my artistic achievement was that segue between two songs. I've been chasing that high ever since. But yeah, like 100%, that was a thing I had in mind. I wanted it to be eclectic. And you know, the thing about a good mixtape is that they're unpredictable. It was always a rule. I don't know how you handled your mixtapes, but in my mixtape circles, we would include a track listing on a separate piece of paper and like fold it up and put it in the tape. And it was like, you can look at this afterwards, but you have to listen to the tape once without it and just like ride that wave blind. And so it's kind of that sort of feeling of like, I don't want you to know what you're in for. I just want you to know that like there is thought behind the journey itself, even though the great thing about a short story collection is like, you can pick it up and put it down at will. You don't have to read it as you would a novel, but you will get something out of it if you do read it that way.
I think another part of, I mean, for me, there's like a couple of genres of mixtapes. There was the mixtape you give someone you want to impress. And you just want it to be the coolest experience. And then there's the mixtape you receive, maybe from someone who's a little bit older than you, like a friend's older sibling or something. And that's the one that, like, that's how
songs to know.
Yes, and that's how I got introduced to like the Zombies and just some really cool tracks. And it was never like the hits. It was always like the ones that were just adjacent that someone just needed you to hear. And I don't know, I hope that younger generations have something like that, because it was just such a cool art form. You know?
It's so different from like just like a shuffle or like a playlist. Like it was personally curated. I also have several of those mixes that other people made for me. There was one that like a dear friend of mine who I went to high school with made me a mix CD before I moved to New York. And so this would have been in the early 2000s. And like those bands that I didn't know about at all became like some of the most important bands in my early 20s because of that album. It was like early Sufjan Stevens and John Vanderslice and just like all of these artists that are like, they froze that period in time in amber. And I learned all about them for the first time through that mix.
Oh my gosh.
And I kind of hope that, you know, if I may be so bold to say, like for at least younger readers, if they read this collection, like I know that short story collections are a hard sell for a lot of people. I see that in reviews. I know that anecdotally and professionally, just kind of as an author, like publishers are very hesitant about short story collections because they don't sell well. And there are a lot of readers who are like, I just can't get invested in a short form sort of thing. And it is my perhaps immodest, but also ambitious hope that if this collection can do well enough, it will introduce the art form to some readers who aren't as comfortable or familiar with it. Because there are several short stories in here that are like I said earlier, are like, they could have totally been written for like Tales from the Crypt or something like that. Like they're just like these nasty little jokes of short stories with a nice devious punchline. And then there are some that like are maybe a little more like John Langany or Mariana Enriquez or, you know, some of my just favorite short story writers. The very beginning of the book is the dedication page is like 50 something names that this book is dedicated to, because it's just some of my favorite short story writers. And like a good short story collection is if you think you don't like short stories, it's just because you haven't found that right collection yet, where you're like, maybe every story doesn't speak to you then, but you might come back to it one day and be like, oh, now I really like that short story, and I don't like that one that was my favorite. And like, it's just like they wait for you, like that perfect mix, and you're just like, every single one of these is like its own little bespoke jewel. And
Yeah.
not every jewel goes with every outfit, but you will find a use for all of them.
And it's so interesting too, just to see. This is the year actually that I'm really getting into short stories for the first time.
Mm,
And it's been so fun as not a fiction writer, but as a writer to just get to see all the different facets of
yeah,
tone and theme and story and character. And I'm really, even just from a craft perspective, really enjoying that. So
yeah,
I'll join you on the mission to bring short stories to more
yeah,
readers because I'm converted. Like I've been having
yeah.
so much fun reading short stories this year.
Oh my god, there's nothing like them. Like, it is, like, I think the perfect length for a horror story is maybe like a novella, just because you get like the character depth and you still can pull the rug out from under the reader and it not feel like a cheat. Uh, but like a good short story is in the horror genre. Like, it's so hard to beat because you can just be mean, you can be funny, you can be scary, you can be unresolved, you can be poetic. Like, short stories are so hard. They're so hard because you do so much with so little. I'm in a writers group with another writer who primarily writes flash fiction,
Wow.
and I am always in awe of the stuff he did because he'll just like somehow contain like a whole world in like a paragraph. I'm just like, how do you do that? That's so insane, but it works. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, changing tracks just a little bit, there are, even though there's a lot of variety, like we've talked about in these stories, there's also some threads that kind of run throughout them. And one of the ones that stood out to me the most was the way that spirituality and faith kind of
Mm,
surfaced in surprising ways. So, for Rest Stop, we've got this character, Abe, and he's on this late night road trip to visit his Bubby in the hospital. And there's all these violent events that befall him, and throughout it all, he's reflecting in her voice
mm.
internally on his Jewish heritage and his faith and what it means to him and what it could mean in the future. And then we meet a pair of evangelical Christians who have a very strange and sinister puppet show that they're putting on. We travel to the desert. There's a yoga retreat that's run by a guru who might be a cult leader, question mark. I think I would say yes. I'm curious to hear what you think. And then, like we said earlier, there's that story about the Beatles where it's a little bit unclear exactly what flavor of a cult is going on there, but
Mm.
there's certainly some kind of an altar and a ritual that has great power behind it. So lots of different manifestations of
Yeah.
faith. But I was curious about what drew you to that theme, or if there's something you've kind of been chewing on throughout your career as a writer and
Oh,
a playwright.
that is such an incredible question. I'm so glad you asked that because like I had once been asked. This was even before I started writing prose again. I was still primarily a playwright when someone had asked if I could like summarize all of my work. Like, is there a central question that I find myself asking? And I had to think about it because as a playwright, especially, and as a novelist too, like I really wanted to be very eclectic and varied in the things that I wrote, and I was always like very proud of how different each piece was. But then I realized almost everything I've written in one way or another comes back to the idea of human versus cosmic, in a way of like man trying to understand God, man in the non-gendered way, just like it's almost always about uh, uh, a character being aware of a smallness in contrast to forces that are much larger than them. And looking back at my own personal history and the things that my mom was also obsessed with, who raised me, like it just made so much sense. Like I was raised pretty observant in a religion in Reform Judaism. Um, but Reform Judaism is pretty lax. So like I was observant, especially like compared to people, like to my friends' kids that I see being raised in Reform Judaism as well. So now I'm like, wow, I was raised really observant. But like it wasn't like an overbearing sort of thing. It wasn't like a fundamental sort of narrowing or whatever you want to call it. I'm full of cold medicine, so just fill in whatever word is best there. But yeah, that has just always been a thing that has fascinated and terrified me and obsessed me for a long time. Like it doesn't even have to be a religion per se, but just kind of the enormity of being mortal, being aware of being alive, but not knowing what that means, not knowing if there's an animating force behind being alive, not even knowing why life exists in the first place. It is such a random freak occurrence. So there's got to be some sort of thing behind it, right? Maybe, we don't know. It's hard to tell. So it's whenever I sit down to like tell a story, and stories to me are very grounded in character and on like, the sort of boots on the ground perspective experience of a character experiencing this thing. And then you add the sort of genre conventions of horror stories being very much about in extremis and about like kind of existential situations and life and death and safety and health. So like I constantly find myself confronting that question and teasing, there's so many infinite responses to that question and to that idea. And I think horror fiction writ large is one of our species' favorite ways of constantly asking those questions of like, what is the meaning of life? What is waiting after death? Every ghost story is an attempt to answer that question. Every monster story is kind of confirmation that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. Like there's just constantly this sort of reification of the fact that like the questions and the paranoia and the fears that you have are valid because we don't know, and it could be anything. And then you add in the very human element of organized religion, which I think is such a corruptible, terrifying conceit, that like there's just great drama to be had in people who are engaged in any sort of fundamentalism, however you want to denominate it, like anyone who's doing something for a kind of religious purpose is almost always in contradiction to like the actual like theological tenets that they're supposed to be espousing. That's the sort of paradox of religious extremists who are doing it in the name of love and in the name of God. And I mean, even just the kind of like self-terrorism that is inflicted, like the concept of like there are so many religions that are at the same time teaching like God is all powerful and he loves you more than anything, and like you are special and filled with God's love, and if you do this one wrong thing, he's gonna make you burn in hell for all eternity until the end of time. And it's like, holy shit, like that's so contradictory. Like people thought that they were going to hell because they ate fucking beef on a particular day of the week, and yet it's also like, but God loves you so much. Like you have no idea the love, the universal love of this entity. And so like that those contradictions just fascinate me as a storyteller and as a human and as a humanist. And I just find them to be so dramatic and interesting and so multifaceted, because there are plenty of people who conduct extremist harm, and they don't even know that that's what they're doing, because they so believe in the sort of contradictory material that they are finding understanding of their life through. And so, yeah, long answer, slightly less long. You're so spot on. That is one of like the central themes going through this story. And it's not a coincidence then that the whole collection ends with, I think, the most spiritual piece, which is the kind of experimental theatrical performance piece, which on its face might not look like it is about religion or spirituality, but it's just kind of a full-throated celebration of identity and the not having answers, and the kind of weirdness of biology and fungology, and like what even is life, what is memory, what is identity, what is any of this, because that to me is the most spiritual question of all. It's one of the reasons why, like, especially the older I get, the more I kind of reconnect with the religion in which I was raised, and find a lot of gratitude for some of its lessons. I mean, again, like stripping away some of the organized sort of baggage of it, but like the longer I live and kind of witness other religions and other friends who have been raised in their kind of mindsets and stuff like that, the more I really appreciate how the Judaism in which I was raised kind of meets every major question with I don't know, like, we don't know. It's okay not to know. Like, you just kind of ask questions around it and find your own personal sort of answer, and that to me is a deeply spiritual journey, and kind of, not to be too pretentious about it, but like, that is also the point of a short story, is to just be like, here are all the questions I have, and like, you can formulate your sort of central answers as you see fit.
Yes. And for listeners, that last experimental piece in the collection, you include a note of how you're meant to read that, and you're meant to be in conversation with other readers as you experience that story. And that really was so striking after spending, I mean, it's a long collection. It's a little over 500 pages.
Yeah.
And to be holed up with all these macabre little treasures, and then to end the book reconnecting with the world, reconnecting with the people around you. I did not read it with other people, but I did find myself almost like half chanting it out loud.
Oh, cool.
And I would definitely encourage people to listen to an audiobook, or read it with friends, or read it yourself, and just experience the language in a more physical way, because it is a really unique, and I think really just a special way to end the collection, especially after reading about some of the things that you put us through, Nat. It's a nice entry into the world.
Thank you. Yeah, that was very much the hope. Like, it is some of the other themes for the whole collection are claustrophobia and identity fracture and kind of paranoia, and just like all these feelings of like, we don't know who we're with at any time, including ourselves. Like, we just do not know. And I wanted it to end like, you can read that story, I think, from a more ominous place, and it will be just as valid. But yeah, the idea was very much like, let's have a little note on some very bizarre community, because, like, again, it's about fungi, and just like, we're all just like made up of all these cells, like individual cells doing their weird little jobs, and yet they still somehow make a cohesive whole. And to bring it back to the spirituality thing too, like, I think that is the fundamental importance of lowercase r religion, is that it is supposed to be this shared thing, this human communal thing, where a bunch of individuals get together and they're just like, how do we get through life? Like, how can we help each other? How can we kind of understand things better? So that was, I still wanted to, like, the overarching feeling of the collection to be like, oh, I'm scared, I'm unsettled and stuff like that. But I wanted there to be that sort of glimmer of a sunrise at the end. And the audiobook is awesome. I'm so happy with how that audiobook, with how that chapter came together in the audiobook. We do an actual version of it.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't plan to ask this question, but now that we're talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
Have you read Japanese Gothic yet?
No, not yet. I want to so bad.
I read it right alongside your book. And there's some amazing twists and surprises in that story. But all I'll say is that I think that Baker is exploring some really similar ground, and the story kind of, which I think the description of it really doesn't capture this. And so I want people to know it's about two people who come together through this strange wormhole in time. But it's also about the way we explain inexplicable events to ourselves. And ultimately, her characters get it wrong. And we find that they're actually brushing up against something they could never even imagine. And she gives us all the answers in the end. And it is so chilling and so cosmic and weird and original. And if you read that, I would love to know your thoughts on it, because it really, really blew me away. And it has that, like, our faith can take us so far, but sometimes there are forces we can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
Have their own agendas. And there's just something so scary about that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so up my alley. Oh, I love it. Oh yeah, I will definitely bump that up on the TBR.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. I think she is so talented.
Yeah,
So
I'm a big
yes.
fan.
Oh, so good. To change tracks as we're wrapping up, just to a little bit of a lighter question. I think you might be the first person to introduce Chekhov's rattlesnake to literature. And I had to ask about it because the kills you dream of are so next level gnarly. They're so much fun. I was going to be so upset with you if you didn't pull that rattlesnake back out of the toilet at the end of that stop. It's like, it's gotta be. It's too important. And so I wondered, like, do you have a drawer in your mind that is just full of these macabre ideas, or do you sit down to write and then just one thing leads to another and all of a sudden there's a rattlesnake and you're like, well, I got to do something with this now? Like, how does your creative process work when it comes to the gnarly stuff?
It's funny that you bring up Chekhov, because like that is a lesson that I like always knew, but like being a professional playwright for a decade and a half, like those muscles are so entrenched and firm in my mind that like there's it's very hard for me to deviate from that, because just like the cliche of Chekhov's gun, which for anyone who doesn't know is the idea that if you show a gun in Act 1, that gun has to go off in Act 3. That is a kind of theatrical maxim for a reason, not just like it's good storytelling, but it's a practical bit of advice, because like if you have a prop, you've paid for that prop, and so that prop needs to be used at some point. And as a theater producer, like again, those lessons are just kind of burrowed into your DNA. It's the same reason why like it's very rare for me to introduce a character without that character also having some sort of payoff or being like an interesting character or something like that, because I'm always like, there's part of me that is always like, well, someone's gonna have to play that role, so it's got to be an interesting role. They're gonna have to show up to the theater or to the set that day to put in their time. So there's got to be like some sort of payoff for this to happen. Though it's very just like base practical sort of thinking. And so yeah, when I'm writing a thing and I introduce whatever ingredient, there's always part of me that, especially if I don't get it right in the first draft, like when I re-encounter it in the second draft, I'm immediately like, oh, well, this thing has to come back. This thing has to have some sort of payoff. Some of it is equally Chekhov as it is like Tales from the Crypt, too, to bring it back to Tales from the Crypt, because Tales from the Crypt is a deeply formative method of storytelling for me as well, because they're basically jokes, and jokes, no detail is wasted, unless that's the point of the joke, that the details are wasted. But like, you don't introduce a thing in a joke unless that has some sort of contributing factor to the punchline. And Tales from the Crypt kind of does a similar thing, and because you know they're very basic setup punchline horror stories that are all these like little morality tales. And so like, if for whatever reason, whether through planning or just like through the sort of riffing that happens when you're writing a first draft, if you're like, oh, this character clips his nails a lot, so he always has like a nail clipper, like guess what's going to get shoved into his eye at the end? Like it's going to be the nail clipper. Like that detail needs to be used, or that detail can just get out of there. If there's no point to it, then it's slowing the aerodynamics down. So if a thing is going to stay in, it's got to earn its keep. Yeah, I have a list in my phone. I have many thousands of notes in my phone, and one of them is like gnarly ways to die, basically. But like, I often find myself not going back to them, because like usually when you're just like writing a thing, you know, the world just kind of reveals itself to you as you're writing it, and then like whatever details are kind of in there will kind of pop out. I'm working on a screenplay treatment right now, and I wonder if I can say this. No, I probably can't say it yet. Okay, so I won't say what the screenplay treatment is, although it might have been announced by the time this airs. We'll see. And if it is, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a cold open kill, because you know all horror movies need a good cold open kill. and giving where it's in the treatment right now, it even says like this character is going to have to die in a gnarly way, but it has to die in a way that is specific to this location. So whatever like physical thing we set up in the location, that needs to be the thing that kills this person. And I don't know what that is yet because like, you know, we're not on set, or like I'll have to like just kind of set that when we get to actually writing the screenplay. But like those are the sort of formulations that I think a tightly constructed horror story or story in general just kind of has to always keep in mind.
Yes, yeah, the last thing you want is some character to wander in and say, well, here's some explanation that you need right
Yeah,
now, and I'm never going to be seen again.
right.
I'm gone, you know? Like, I think those are the kinds of things where you leave the theater or you put the book down and you think, oh, I would have edited that differently.
Yeah.
I would have done it this way. And yeah, I feel like a really well-crafted story feels inevitable, but it
Mm-hmm.
also surprises you somehow at the same time. That's
Yeah, like you can look at like Scream is a great example of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you know, Scream was riffing off of Psycho, which was kind of the first kind of great way to do this. Because anytime like a movie that you know is going to have a high body count has a celebrity in the cast. Ironically, I think Scream 2 does this in the inverse, kind of to its detriment, because Scream 2 has Laurie Metcalf. Spoilers for Scream 2. If you haven't seen Scream 2, skip ahead. But like, what makes Scream 1 so great is it has Drew Barrymore, and you're like, well, okay, they hired Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore's going to be through this entire movie then, because like we know Drew Barrymore, she's a big get, and then to kill her in the beginning is like, oh shit, okay, like you used Drew Barrymore in a finite way, purposefully, just like how Janet Leigh was killed in Psycho. With Scream 2, like Laurie Metcalf is just like there in the background, and I think if you're, you know, just kind of baseline savvy as like someone who knows how movies are made, it's hard to be surprised that she's the killer in the end, because like, well, they hired Laurie Metcalf. They're not going to not give her a scene where she gets to be Laurie Metcalf, you know. So yeah, it's all like the same lesson again and again. Anytime you see like stunt casting, you're like, well, I know this happens all the time in like miniseries now too, where like they'll cast like a major star and it's like a mystery, and like they'll even put that person in the credits, and you're like, well, I know that person is going to be somehow related to the reveal because I haven't seen him for like 3 episodes, but like you hired Mark Ruffalo, so like Mark Ruffalo's gonna have a big scene.
Yes.
They can still surprise you, but it's like an unavoidable clue that it's going to be something major, because otherwise why would they have used that? It's the same lesson as like, why would there be a gun over that mantelpiece if we're not going to use that gun? Why is there a rattlesnake?
Oh, exactly. This is totally unrelated. And Sean, if you're editing this, Mr. Sean O'Connor, you can cut this. But I was talking to a friend who has a young kid, and I think there needs to be like a Knives Out style adaptation of the Amelia Bedelia books with like star-studded cast. And I mean, imagine Kristen Wiig as Amelia Bedelia, just causing chaos. And there's a series of them, but they're standalones. And I mean, I feel like I would want to see what whoever they cast would be up to.
I support this
That's what
idea.
I
That would be amazing.
Oh
Dear
my gosh.
Hollywood.
Yes. Hey, you're a screenwriter, so I'm putting it out there. You're my connection.
I'll put the word out.
Yes.
It's IP. They'll love it.
I know, exactly. It's untapped. There's never been an adaptation to my knowledge.
Give us the Bedelia universe.
Free idea to Hollywood. Oh, well, I've kept you on for almost an hour now. And I want to wrap us up here. But we have a couple standard questions that Sean has introduced. So I'm going to dutifully ask them. And I'm so curious to hear your response.
What's
but
your
the first
favorite
two-
restaurant on Long Island?
Yeah, there you go. The first two are a pair and they go together. So I would love to know, what's a slept on horror book and a slept on horror movie that you'd recommend that
Ooh.
people don't talk about enough, that you would love more people to experience? And you can always
Shit.
take a beat and think on that because I'm springing it on you.
That's a damn good question.
Isn't it?
All right, multiple answers just flew through my head. First off, everybody knows Tananarive Dew's The Reformatory, but you need to go read her back catalog because her back catalog is incredible. Uh, every one of her books, the African Immortal series, like just every one of her titles and her short story collection, Ghost Summer, incredible. But the other title that flashed in my head because I was singing its praises on social media the other day is a book called Hellhound by Ken Greenhall. That it's reissued by Valancourt Books. It's kind of a typical like Valancourt book to reissue. You know, it was a paperback, pulpy little paperback from hell, kind of shocker with a garish cover, and it's about a killer bull terrier. And so it's got that kind of like immediately post Cujo sort of thing, but it's from the dog's perspective, and the dog is a sociopath. So it's kind of like the dog version of American Psycho in a weird way. It is so much better than it has to be. It is such a smart, chilling book about, you know, literal inhumanity because it's a dog. But it is like so good and devious and weird, and yeah, I love that book. So that's fresh in mind. Oh my god, I have so many books. I should stop myself. So then I was like, oh, what about Tom Tryon's The Other? But no. One middle-aged white dude from the 80s is enough. Well, from the 60s and 70s. But a movie. A movie. Let's see. I also have a note of some of my favorites. Because anytime I'm asked for one of my favorites, my mind goes blank.
I know. I'm always like, I've never seen a movie. Actually.
Yeah.
What is that?
What is movie? Let's see. No, people know that one. These aren't that obscure. Lake Mungo. Everybody knows Lake Mungo now. Okay, let's say. This is very exciting content. I know.
I'm really in suspense. I'm like so curious to know what you're going to pick.
Does Tigers Are Not Afraid feel obscure enough? Do you know that movie?
I've heard of it, but I've not seen it. It's been recommended to me a couple times. So sell me on it.
Maybe you know what? That movie needs way more of a fan base. It's Issa Lopez, who also did the most recent season of True Detective. But it is just a beautiful, I believe it's set in Mexico. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but it's just one of those movies that it's kind of similar to like Devil's Backbone in that it's like about kids and ghosts. And it's kind of about a bunch of kids who are you know, they are in a not great neighborhood, and they're kind of I'm blanking on some of the details, so anyone who's seen it more recently might be like, that is way on. But basically, like, through circumstances that are not great, these kids are kind of on their own, and also they are experiencing hauntings that are contributing to a larger mystery that they get answers to. And it is so sad and beautiful and chilling and heartbreaking. And she's such a talented filmmaker. And I know True Detective was controversial in some circles. Shocking that it was the one that had a female creative and leads. Wow, what are the odds that some people reacted really negatively to it? But like, I know, it's so weird. Must be totally merit based. But like, I loved that season of True Detectives, and it showed how great she is at just like chilling mise en scène and just like her facility with the camera and you know, just like the scary images. This movie is that times 1,000. Like, it's just so beautiful. Yeah, I saw it in the theater on a limited release when it was first coming out, and like the whole audience was just like gasping at the combination of beauty and terror. Like, more people need to see that movie.
Yeah, and it's even more impressive knowing that there are children carrying the story.
Mm-hmm.
when
Yeah.
you have a cool concept or a good script and you've got really experienced, talented actors, that's one thing. But when you've got, kids who are doing this for the first time and have that raw emotion to them and the raw
Yeah.
instinct, it's just a
They're so
different
good.
thing.
The kid actors are incredible too.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna watch that for sure. That is moving up on my list.
Okay, I did it. I sold you.
And the last question I have is, I think a really fun one to end on, which is, what makes you happy lately? And you can't say friends or family. That's the rule. Consider that a given, just so nobody's offended, when they listen to this. But yeah, what's making you happy lately?
I love this question. This is great. This is a very Sean question too, because Sean makes me happy. He's a very lovely guy. I'm always happy to see him. Let's see. Well, if I can't say friends or family, my instinct would be to say the horror community, because the horror community is incredible, and I'm just incredibly grateful for readers and support, especially when like the Stephen King intro was announced, and like just even when the blurb for When the Wolf Comes Home came out, and people were just they knew how much that meant to me, and like that level of being embraced and kind of awareness and support like meant as much, if not more, to me than the blurb itself. Like the horror community is just so wonderful, and I'm so grateful for everybody. But I can't say that, so I'm not going to say that. Well, I mean, the biggest thing that probably makes me happy consistently and all the time is music. So I guess since we talked about Run for Your Life, that feels appropriate to this conversation. There's still such good goddamn music coming out all the time. The past few years have been so great for music. There's great classic music that, like, even me as like a music obsessive who, I have a huge library of albums, and like I was steeped in like obscure 60s psychedelia and stuff like that. And even then, like, I'm still constantly like, oh my God, I've never even heard of this band or this album that like could have been as big as Odyssey and Oracle as like a cult favorite, but like it's dozens of times more obscure. Like 9 people know this album, and it's just so good. So I love music, and I'm so grateful for music. For anyone who is like again, middle-aged white guy who's like, music sucks nowadays, shut the fuck up. Music is great. There's still such great music out there. If you're a snob and you're like, I hate Geese is great. There's so many great albums. There's so many great bands, and so many great genres. So just like get some music, get some good music in your ears. Don't be an asshole.
Well, podcast is over, so this is the perfect time. You're already listening to it somewhere where there's
Yeah,
music, so go do that.
You have headphones in.
Oh my gosh. Well, Nat, this has been such a joy. Thank you so much for spending time with Macabre Daily today.
Thank you.
Congratulations. This is such an amazing collection, and
I'm
so excited for people to read it.
Thank you for reading and for your incredible questions. They were so smart to have you on board. Macabre Daily, you made the right choice.